Shalom. I'm Rabbi Amy Scheinerman. Thank you for joining me. As we all continue to live in the isolation imposed by COVID-19, I want to combine two very different ideas for your consideration. The first is the concept of tuma and tahara, ritual purity and impurity, which we encounter first in the Torah. Priests needed to be in a state of ritual purity to make sacrifices at the altar of the wilderness tabernacle, the Mishkan, and later in the Mikdash, the temple in Jerusalem. The laws and procedures governing ritual purity were dramatically expanded by the rabbis of the Talmud. Here's a brief example from the Babylonian Talmud, Tractate Pesachim. The corner of a garment that comes into contact with a dead creeping animal confers upon the garment first-degree ritual impurity status. Bread that comes into contact with the garment confers upon the bread second-degree ritual impurity status. Stew that comes into contact with the bread confers upon the stew third-degree ritual impurity status. Wine that comes into contact with the stew confers upon the wine fourth-degree ritual impurity status. And oil that comes into contact with the wine, in that case, does the wine confer upon the oil fifth-degree ritual impurity? If your head is spinning, that's a pretty common reaction. Since the destruction of the Jerusalem temple, tuma and tahara, ritual purity and impurity, once encompassing concerns of the central Jewish institution, the temple in Jerusalem, is but a minor player in modern Jewish life, abiding only in the corners of a symbolic concern about cemeteries and the laws of family purity. The second idea concerns the religious and philosophical notions of body and soul. Since ancient times, people have debated whether we human beings are of one substance or two distinct substances, that is, whether we are composed of physical bodies and immaterial souls. This debate has taken place in one guise or another in most every religious and philosophical system. In the ancient world, Hellenists and Christians held to a rigid distinction between body and soul. And indeed, there are many people today who would agree with just such a distinction. The rabbis of the Talmud in their time have an interesting take on the body-soul dichotomy debate that I find helpful for our time. They imagine a debate taking place between the great sage and compiler of the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, who is called simply Rabbi in the Talmud, and a Roman emperor, Antoninus, who is most likely a legendary creation of the rabbis that enables them to stage the sort of debate that I'm going to tell you about in a moment, and to test out certain philosophical and theological ideas. In this particular case, Antoninus claims that if body and soul are truly separate entities, then when it comes time to be judged by God, each, body and soul separately, can blame the other for the person's sins. Rabbi replies with a creative allegory that suggests a far more nuanced way of thinking about body and soul. To help us appreciate the Midrash, let me explain that in rabbinic allegories, a king represents God. In this allegory, we will also encounter two watchmen with a sly plan to steal the king's prize figs. One watchman is blind, the other is lame. The blind man represents the body, the lame man, the soul. And to make this even that much clearer for many of you who, like me, like to read as well as hear, I will put the story on your screen for you. Here it is. Rabbi replied, "I will tell you a parable. This may be compared to a human king who owned a beautiful orchard that contained splendid figs. He appointed 2 watchmen, one lame, that's the soul, and the other blind, that's the body. One day, the lame man said to the blind, "I see beautiful figs in the orchard. Come and lift me onto your shoulders so we may procure and then eat them." So the lame man rode on the shoulders of the blind man, procured the figs, and they ate them. Sometime later, the owner of the orchard, that would be the king, came and inquired of them, "Where are my beautiful figs?" The lame man replied, "Have I feet to walk with?" The blind man replied, "Have I eyes to see with?" What did the king do? He placed the lame man on the blind man and judged them together. So will the Holy One bring the soul, replace it in the body, and judge them together. As it is written in Psalm 50, verse 4, God will summon the heavens above and the earth for the trial of God's people. And now the Midrash, Rabbi's allegory, will interpret each phrase of that verse. God will summon the heavens above. This refers to the soul. And the earth for the trial of God's people. This refers to the body. This passage comes from the Babylonian Talmud from Tractate Sanhedrin. Just as neither watchman can function alone to guard the orchard, only together are they one complete guard, the rabbis, by and large, did not hold with the dichotomy of body and soul touted by Hellenism and Christianity, certainly not to the same degree that those traditions did. They understood a human being to be an integrated whole. Yet they taught that at death, which is what is referred to as the time of judgment, or perhaps the Messianic age is a better interpretation, whatever it is that is the soul separates from the body, it was so integrally a part of during life, to reside with God until the end of time. And in the Messianic age, when we are all resurrected, they taught, God will reinfuse the body with its soul, because a complete body includes what we would call a soul. Without wholly rejecting the body-soul dichotomy prevalent in the ancient world, the rabbis assert the wholly integrated body and soul nature of human beings. The reason I think this is so significant is because it elevates our physical existence, our bodies, and what we do with our bodies to the level of the sacred. This message is powerfully delivered in a marvelous midrash about the sage Hillel. This midrash comes from Vayikra Rabbah, also known as Leviticus Rabbah. Once, after Hillel had finished teaching his disciples, he accompanied them partway home. They asked him, "Rabbi, where are you going?" He replied, "To perform a mitzvah, a religious obligation." They asked, "What mitzvah is this?" He said, "I am going to the bathhouse." They questioned him, "Is this really a religious obligation?" They're surprised to learn that he thinks that going to the bathhouse is a mitzvah, a religious obligation. And he explains, yes, just as people appointed to bathe and scrub the publicly erected statues of the king are paid to do so and attain status for their work, all the more so should I, who is created in the divine image, care for my body. And indeed, All of us, Torah teaches, are created in the divine image. For Hillel, being created in the image of God elevates our bodies to a level of holiness. And indeed, we would be unable to fulfill any sacred responsibility or perform any holy act without our bodies. For some people, the distinction between body and soul is a metaphor for talking about the holiness and potential of our embodied selves, our physical existence. With this in mind, I want to share with you a blessing for washing hands. In this era of the coronavirus, COVID-19, washing hands is both a mundane and crucial act of physical hygiene, and also can be a holy act because it protects our lives and the lives of other people. Body and soul fully interwoven, mundane and sacred, fully integrated. If you find yourself tiring of counting to 20 or singing happy birthday, here's a religiously meaningful way to imbue hand washing with holiness. I'd like to share with you a blessing that is not the usual one for Nitilat Yadayim from Jewish tradition. This one was crafted by the Jewish liturgical poet laureate Marcia Falk and is found in her book, The Book of Blessings. Tizkor nafshenu et kedushat haguf b'nitilat yadayim. May our souls recall the holiness of the body through washing the hands. Let me share that one more time. Tizkor nafshenu et kedushat haguf b'nitilat yadayim. May our souls recall the holiness of the body through washing the hands. I've attached a PDF of this blessing together with transliteration and translation below. You're welcome to download and print it out. I taped a copy beside our kitchen sink at home. In the last analysis, the debate about whether body and soul are separate substances or one whole may well be a debate about whether our bodies are sacred or mundane. Certainly they are mundane, but I'm voting that they are also sacred on the basis of our potential as human beings to do what is holy. What do you think? Please, stay safe, keep others safe, and stay well. Shalom.